Welcome to a world where silence speaks louder than words and truth cuts deeper than revenge. Every story here unravels a family built on pride, power, and hidden betrayals. Step inside the lives where love fades, trust breaks, and control turns into poison. Watch destinies shaped by a father's pride, a brother's deceit, and a husband's shocking secrets. These aren't just stories. They're emotional journeys through loyalty, loss, and quiet revenge. Here silence becomes strength, pain turns to power, and justice is served not with rage, but with revelation. If you crave gripping family dramas, raw emotions, and unforgettable twists that feel hauntingly real, you're in the right place. A house built on pride never truly becomes a home. It stands tall for the world to admire, but inside, the cracks spread quietly, like whispers no one dares to acknowledge. In this family, everything revolved around the father. His word was law, his pride was scripture. He believed men were born to lead and women were meant to follow. When decisions were made, one voice mattered, and it was never the one that carried compassion or reason. He looked at his son as the heir to everything, his business, his respect, his dreams. The daughter's silence was mistaken for weakness, her kindness for compliance. Every effort to prove worth was brushed aside as unnecessary. Every idea dismissed before it could even be heard. It wasn't hate. It was arrogance masked as tradition. A father's blind belief in his own righteousness poisoned the air everyone breathed. But pride has a way of rewriting its own story. The son he worshipped, the one he believed would carry his name with honor, had secrets that could shatter the illusion of perfection. Money vanished from accounts, debts grew, and behind closed doors, betrayal brewed. The father refused to see it. Love for his son blinded him to the truth, while his coldness toward the one he ignored became sharper with every passing day. When the family business began to collapse, whispers turned to blame. It was easy to accuse the one who had never been trusted, easier still to protect the one who had always been favored. But truth doesn't stay buried forever, it rises, ruthless and uninvited. And when it did, it wasn't the father's enemies who destroyed him. It was his own blood. The son's betrayal was more than financial. It was personal. Lies about partnerships, stolen contracts, and a hidden life no one could have imagined came to light. The father's empire, built on control and pride, was suddenly standing on sand. And in that collapse, something unexpected happened. The one voice he had silenced all his life became the only one that could save him. But forgiveness doesn't come easily when wounds run that deep. Years of being unseen, unheard, unvalued. Those scars don't fade. They fuel something far more powerful than revenge. It isn't rage that destroys, it's revelation. Watching him realize the truth, that his pride had raised a liar and crushed the only one who could have been loyal, was the kind of justice no court could deliver. He learned too late that strength doesn't come from being born a man, and loyalty doesn't come from control. The silence he demanded became the silence that condemned him. In the end, pride didn't just destroy his name. It destroyed his peace, and when the house finally crumbled, no one needed to lift a hand. The weight of his own choices did the rest. A brother chosen, a legacy stolen. Those words carry a weight that never really leaves. From the beginning, everything was set in stone. The son was the pride, the future, the chosen one. Every decision, every dream, every ounce of trust was handed to him, as if destiny itself had signed the deed. The other's sacrifices went unseen, hidden beneath the shadow of favoritism that swallowed everything pure. What no one realized was that silence can be sharper than any blade. It doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just waits quietly, patiently, until truth walks in uninvited. Behind the smiles and family gatherings, something darker brewed. The father's choice to crown one child as heir didn't just wound hearts. It planted seeds of resentment that would one day grow into something far stronger than pride. The brother everyone trusted wasn't what he seemed. Greed hid behind charm, deceit behind confidence. He made promises in the name of family but built his own empire in secret, one built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. The father never questioned him. too blinded by his belief that men were born to lead. He couldn't see that the empire he had built was slowly being drained from within, by the very sun he thought was his reflection. Years passed in silence, but the truth has a cruel way of resurfacing. When the company's finances began to crumble, fingers pointed everywhere except where they should. Blame was easier to place than guilt to admit, but hidden documents, forged signatures, and quiet transactions told a story far louder than words ever could. The golden sun had sold everything piece by piece, not for survival, but for control. When the truth finally surfaced, the father's world shattered. The one he had trusted most had betrayed him in the worst way possible, leaving him with nothing but the wreckage of his own arrogance. And the one he had dismissed, the one he thought too fragile, too insignificant, stood quietly in the aftermath, not with vengeance, but with truth. Because revenge doesn't always need violence. Sometimes it's just the weight of truth being seen, finally, after years of being ignored. But the story didn't end there. The betrayal didn't stop with the father. It spilled into a marriage built on lies. The husband who promised honesty turned out to be no different from the father who once preached righteousness. The same patterns repeated, the same deception masked by affection. Control wore a gentler face this time, but it was the same poison, manipulation wrapped in love. What once felt like loyalty became captivity. Every word, every gesture, every promise from his mouth carried the echo of that same arrogance. The belief that silence meant acceptance. But silence, once again, became the sharpest weapon. Watching him lose everything he used to dominate, seeing the pride in his eyes fade into fear, that was the moment balance returned. And when the final secret came out, when all masks fell away, only one truth remained. No one steals a legacy without paying for it in the end. A father's decision can build a home, or break the souls living inside it. His choices were never questioned. They were commands disguised as wisdom, decisions wrapped in tradition. He believed obedience was love and silence was respect. Every action was dictated by what he thought was right, not what was fair. His word decided who mattered and who didn't. It wasn't cruelty in his eyes, it was order. But in that order, hearts broke quietly, one by one, until all that remained was the sound of unspoken pain echoing through the years. His son walked the path paved for him, a path carved out of favoritism and expectation. Every success he achieved was celebrated, every mistake forgiven before it even reached the surface. And somewhere in the background, another life was sacrificed to maintain the illusion of harmony. It wasn't envy that grew, it was truth, hidden under layers of obedience that no one dared question. Tradition was the shield that protected his ego. He said men were meant to carry the family's name, while women were meant to keep the family's peace. It sounded noble to those who didn't live under it. But the truth was uglier. That belief became a prison, one built of duty, love, and fear. The walls were thick with guilt, and every act of obedience became another brick that sealed the silence tighter. When the truth finally emerged, it didn't come from confrontation. It came from quiet observation. The golden son, the chosen one, wasn't what he seemed. Lies had filled his world for years, financial secrets, betrayals in business, and a moral decay that no one had dared to expose. He had learned arrogance from his father and turned it into something far more dangerous: control. The empire that was supposed to carry the family's name was built on deceit, and when it started to crumble, the father's pride fell with it. But the deeper betrayal came later, from within the walls of marriage. The husband who promised partnership carried the same bloodline of ego and dominance. He spoke softly, but his words carried the same authority that once ruled that old house. What had once been obedience turned to resistance. Every moment of silence, every suppressed truth, began to rise like smoke from a fire long denied. It wasn't fury that followed, it was clarity, the realization that obedience had never earned love, only control. That tradition had never protected, it had imprisoned. and that the people who claimed to love the most were often the ones who demanded the highest price for peace. When the truth finally came out, it didn't need to be shouted. It simply existed, undeniable, unbreakable, and irreversible. The father's legacy collapsed and the husband's pride followed, and as the silence settled once more, the only sound that remained was the echo of his own choices destroying everything he once called his truth. Love fades when it's given unequally, when one child is showered with praise and the other is taught to find pride in silence. That's how it began, one celebrated, one dismissed. Every achievement of the favored child became a family victory, and every effort of the other disappeared in the shadow of comparison. The house looked perfect from the outside, the kind of family people envied, but inside there was a quiet corrosion eating away at its core. The father stood as the ruler of that world, the mother his silent reflection. He believed that leadership belonged to strength, and strength belonged to men. The son inherited that arrogance like a family heirloom. Every meal, every conversation, every decision reminded everyone who was chosen and who was not. The daughter's silence was expected, her dreams treated like childish whims. Love in that house came with conditions. Obedience was the price of peace. But power, when left unchecked, becomes poison. The son who was once the pride of the family began using that power to manipulate, to deceive, to bend every rule that didn't serve him. His confidence turned cruel. Behind the smiles, he hid debts, lies, and a growing addiction to control. The father, too proud to admit his mistake, defended him with the same blind faith that had defined his life. Tradition became his excuse, denial his comfort. The daughter watched it all, the hypocrisy, the favoritism, the slow collapse of what once seemed unshakable. The same silence that had been forced upon her became her armor. She learned how to read the lies in every smile, the truth behind every excuse. While everyone else played their parts in the family performance, she quietly collected the truth piece by piece. Then came the marriage, a continuation of the same story, only with a different name. The husband carried the same air of control that once belonged to the father, gentle at first, then demanding, then suffocating. Promises of partnership turned into commands. What he couldn't dominate with affection, he ruled with guilt. The same poison of power had found its way into another home, another heart. When love fades, what remains is revelation. The cracks in the family's perfect image began to show. The son's lies came to light, the father's denial turned to shame, and the husband's mask began to slip. Every betrayal connected like threads in a tapestry of deceit, woven so tightly that one pull unraveled it all. And when it finally fell apart, there was no need for revenge in words or action. The truth did the work on its own. The same pride that once built the family's name now buried it. The same control that once silenced hearts now destroyed the men who held it. In the end, the house stood quiet again. But this time, it wasn't silence of submission. It was the silence that comes after justice has been served. Revenge isn't always about anger or chaos. It's quiet, deliberate, almost poetic. It takes shape in silence, in the moments when words are swallowed and dignity is preserved. It begins when pain turns into purpose, when every humiliation becomes a reminder that truth always finds its voice. That's how it started, small, invisible, but growing stronger with every lie that was told and every boundary that was crossed. The father had built his world on dominance, and the husband followed in his footsteps. Both believed silence meant acceptance. They mistook patience for weakness and loyalty for dependence. Each insult, each manipulation, each carefully delivered wound became another brick in the wall they thought would keep control intact. But silence was never surrender. It was observation. It was waiting for the moment when truth could no longer be buried under pride. The husband's charm was a mask he wore effortlessly. To everyone else, he was the ideal man, respectable, intelligent, loving. But behind the doors of that perfect home lived secrets no one could imagine. The same voice that spoke sweetly in public became sharp, commanding, and cold in private. Control became his language of love, and deception his habit. Every decision was his, every opinion dismissed unless it served his pride. But even the most practiced liar leaves traces. The late night calls that stopped when footsteps approached, the financial records that didn't add up, the subtle scent of a stranger's perfume lingering on his clothes. It all began to form a pattern. Silence turned from protection into strategy. Every detail was remembered, every lie carefully filed away. He believed no one was watching, no one was smart enough to piece it all together. He was wrong. The quiet revenge began with truth. Documents that exposed his hidden dealings, messages that revealed his affairs. The same patience he had mocked became the weapon that dismantled his world. When everything came to light, it wasn't rage that broke him. It was exposure. Watching the people he had fooled turn their backs, seeing his carefully crafted image collapse, that was the justice he had earned. The father's legacy of arrogance ended the same way. The lies he had built his family upon crumbled once the truth about his son's betrayal surfaced. Both men, father and husband, fell to the same disease, pride. They believed control was power, never realizing that truth holds more strength than any authority. Revenge didn't come with shouting or chaos. It came with calm. It came with proof. It came with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that every insult, every rejection, every cruel word had finally met its answer, not through anger, but through truth. And when silence finally spoke, it didn't need to scream. It simply let them drown in the sound of their own downfall. In the end, silence always demands payment. It begins as protection, a way to keep peace in a house already trembling under the weight of pride. But peace built on suppression is an illusion. It cracks the moment truth begins to breathe. The father had spent his life believing control was love and authority was respect. His voice ruled every corner of the house, every decision, every relationship. He believed he was preserving his family's honor, not realizing he was burying their hearts in shame. He raised his son in his own image, proud, commanding, unbending. The boy learned early that mistakes were to be hidden, not corrected. Lies became tools and manipulation became second nature. The father mistook this for strength. Every time the son outsmarted someone, he smiled with satisfaction, not understanding that deceit was already poisoning the family's foundation. And when the son betrayed him, it was not rebellion, it was inheritance. The father's pride turned to regret too late. What he had built to prove his superiority became the fire that consumed him. His empire fell piece by piece, not from outside enemies, but from the greed and dishonor of the child he had once called his reflection. The walls that once echoed with his voice now carried the weight of his silence, a silence filled with guilt, shame, and realization. The destruction didn't stop there. The husband, molded from the same soil of control, carried that legacy into marriage. His charm was as calculated as his father's authority. Every compliment had an undertone of possession, every decision masked as concern. He believed love meant obedience, that quietness meant devotion. And just like the father before him, he mistook silence for peace. But silence doesn't last forever. It listens, it learns, and it remembers. Every insult that was brushed aside, every tear that fell unnoticed, every secret he thought would never surface, they all waited. The truth doesn't need to shout. It has its own timing. When it came completely. The affairs, the deceit, the manipulation that had held everything together finally tore it apart. The same people he had once controlled began to see him clearly. The father's reputation shattered under the weight of his son's crimes. The husband's pride collapsed when his lies were exposed. The family that had once stood as a symbol of order now became the embodiment of hypocrisy. Their empire of control burned quietly, not with noise, but with the slow, suffocating heat of regret. In the ashes of that downfall, tears were the only truth left. Guilt replaced arrogance, and silence, the very thing they had demanded from others, became their punishment. And in the end, nothing remained of their legacy but the sound of their own pride destroying everything they once claimed to love. If this story gripped your heart and left you speechless, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another twist. Every week, we dive into stories that expose hidden betrayals, family secrets, and the quiet revenge that changes everything. Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes your silence hides a story too. Thanks for watching, and remember, in this world, truth always finds its way out.